Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our friend, the one and only Daniel Pink. How's it going, Daniel? Did you like that?
I loved it. Yeah,
Loved it?
I wish I hadn't seen the preview to know that they were primed for it, though.
So thank you for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
I came a long way.
Came a long way. I mean, you're just like 3 blocks away from
I
here.
came all the way from the mean streets of Cleveland Park to be here with you. Yeah.
So we always like to start off on a personal note.
Okay. What do you
So
have to share with us?
Well, so no, it's real simple. It's
Okay,
like
yeah,
we go way back. Like, where were you born? Were you raised?
Okay. Yep. I can answer those.
Okay, answer
What's
that.
the first one? Where was I born?
Were you born? Were you raised? And what did your parents do?
Where was I born? Okay. So where was I born? Where was I raised? What did my parents do?
Yeah.
All right. I was born on a steamy July day in Wilmington, Delaware, but I didn't live in Wow.
That's my brother.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so, but I didn't live in Wilmington, Delaware very long. When I was a little kid, my parents moved to Columbus, Ohio, and that's where I grew up. My father was, he's a PhD chemist who worked a little bit in industry, but not very long, and ended up had this weird job where he was kind of like a translator and scientific librarian for a nonprofit. And my mother was a school teacher. So my parents cumulatively, I think, worked in the private sector, like cumulatively between them 4 years. So that's why I went to work for myself.
Well, you went to law school, obviously, right? And then
I did go to law school. Well, yeah.
And then what that?
What would you? I mean, I can tell.
No.
Listen,
We'll get there. We'll get there.
You're on my favorite topic.
Okay, sure. Let's go.
Which is
Let's
me.
go talk
No,
about
go ahead. What do you got?
So before law school,
Yes, sir.
Talk about your most like favorite writing assignment.
Oh, interesting.
As a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're an author, so
Yeah.
what was
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I had this. I don't have very many epiphanies. I'm very, very slow worker, very slow thinker, very slow at just about everything. I have very few epiphanies, but one kind of mild epiphany that I had, like what's a half epiphany? And a half epiphany, that's pretty good, or an epiph. Was when I was in 9th grade. So I was in, I grew up in a tiny little town, sort of a suburb of Columbus, where the elementary school was here, and the junior high, because I'm old enough that middle school had not been invented yet, so it was a junior high, and it was right above it, and then the high school was next door, and I lived 2 blocks away, so I took the same walk to school every day for 12 years. And so, I didn't really like school all that much. But in 9th grade, something happened to me. This is way too long-winded for the payoff you're going to get, so forgive me. So I was always a decent writer, because you could be a decent writer in school, especially the schools that I went to, if you basically did your writing neatly and gave the teacher pretty much what he or she, mostly she, wanted. And at one point I said, I'm going to try out for the school newspaper. And so I decided to do a story. I was in 9th grade to do a story for the school newspaper. And I had to write a story. This is amazing because I've forgotten most of what I've written, but this I remember. I had to write a story about the girls' softball team. And I had to go interview the coach of the girls' softball team. And there was a certain point when I was interviewing him and getting prepared to write this thing where something clicked in my head in a way that had never clicked before in all of my education. Because I looked at that and said, wait a second. I'm writing about like real people who I'm going to talk to. And someone might read this. In contrast to, a school paper where only the teacher is reading it. It's like, wow, this better be right and it better be good. And so suddenly I was motivated to like actually do something great. And at that moment I said, wow, wait a second, there are certain things and there are things in life where you actually want to do really, really great things because you care so deeply about it, not because you want to just get an A.
So was there a reason why you did the girls softball team versus the regular boys?
Well, there wasn't a boys softball team.
Only baseball.
No, yeah, there's
Sports
no. You know what it was is because there's a bias against continues to this day against women's sports, and so the newest guy, the youngest person, got the least desirable sports assignment, which ended up being the girls softball team.
Got it. So, I mean, since then, you've written 5 books.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk about the 2 of them, To
Okay.
Sell as Human and Drive.
Okay.
But you guys are in for a real treat here because we're not
my
going to be
God.
talking about, okay, let's talk about this book and then, go to, the table of contents. What we're going to do is we're going to do this real life example. We're going to overlay the concept that you've been talking about in your books.
Okay.
And we're going to put this in practical
Great.
scenarios for
Cool.
the start.
Great.
So
Okay.
So again, this life cycle is like, hey, you have an idea, you're going to pitch it, you're going to hire, you're going to try to have techniques to sustain the
Great.
company, right? So
Okay.
let's go start from the beginning, right? I have a startup idea, okay? And so what would you suggest that I need to answer for myself, right, as a founder?
Right.
What do I need to ask myself before I do this startup? Like, do I need to have like a drive or a purpose behind that? Like, what would
Yeah.
you say?
Yeah, it's. I mean, startup ideas are a dime a dozen. That's part of the problem. It's like. I mean, I can. People say, "Oh, I have a great idea for a book." Okay, fantastic. And I think that it's sort of like writing a book and doing a startup. I think are somewhat similar in that most people, when you really press them deeply, they want to have started a company. They want to have written a book, because the actual doing of it is torture. And most people don't like to endure that kind of torture. So what I would do is I would test basically the level of, it's hard, level of commitment. So are you willing to go 2 years, 3 years, 4 years beyond, not making a lot of money? Are you willing to end in failure? Are you willing to be as deeply disappointed as you ever have been in your entire life if it doesn't go right? And these are, I mean it. These are very tough questions. And I would also kind of recognize the, try to look at the kind of the constitution of the person. Did this person have? Is this person doing startup? Has this person been doing startup-like things throughout her life as a kind of expression of who she really was? Was this the kid with the lemonade stand? Was this the kid who was doing something unconventional in school? Was this kid a little bit of a nonconformist? And those are the things that I would look for. And let me just add one thing here, because sort of I think it's instructive, Brian. So I came to being a writer in sort of a half-assed way, in that it was a long and winding road, and I didn't really become a writer for reals until I was in my early 30s. Okay. And so what I did in the course of that, I went to law school, I worked in politics for a while, and what I found out was, here's what. So I graduated from high school. I go to college. I do well in college because I'm actually, I learned how to be a very good student. That's what I learned in elementary and secondary school, how to be a very good student. And so as a good student, did well in college, went to law school, had a sort of a come to Jesus moment where I said, oh my God, I am not practicing law. There's no way on God's green earth I'm going to do this with my life. But I was deeply interested in politics. I worked in politics, became a political speechwriter for a long time, and then had another moment where I said, "Oh my God, I don't want my soul is already so hollow as it is. I don't want it to be fully hollowed out by working for the rest of my life in politics." Now, here's where the instruction comes in, and I actually am going to steer this ship back to your actual question. Throughout my life, from the time that I was in college, I would write on the quote unquote on the side. So I would write articles on the side. When I was kind of a hardcore social science person in college. I majored in linguistics, which is a very sort of like probably the most kind of analytical, almost we had computer science majors take linguistics as well. Very, very analytical, very mathematical form of social science. That was what I did, but for reasons I didn't understand, I was entering short story contests, just because that's what I did on the side. When I was in law school, I started liking to write op-eds. So I did that on the side. When I was working in jobs in politics and government, even though I was writing magazine articles, newspaper articles on the side, in many cases I wasn't even allowed under federal ethics laws to be paid for those things, and yet I was doing it. And so at one point, when my wife and I lived in an apartment in Adams Morgan at the time, I mean, we lived in that apartment at the time. Adams Morgan gets more cheers than Yale, which is a good sign for the startup world. You know, I was at my computer. It was like midnight, and my wife is basically saying to me, Dan, hello, you're working at midnight. You have a very demanding job. You're working at midnight writing an article for free. I think you like doing this. I think this is what you do. You know, and so you have all these people out there giving horrible career advice saying, what's your passion? And I fucking hate that question. I mean, it's a terrible question. So that if somebody... So, you know, because somebody says to me, what's your passion? I don't know about you. I freeze. Like, because you have to give a really good answer to that, right? It's like, oh, I like baseball. You know, like, I don't know. You know, you got to give a really good answer to that. And I think it's the wrong question. I think the real question is, what do you do? What do you do as a matter of who you are? What do you do when no one is watching? And it took me literally, Brian, till I went off on my own in I was in my early 30s. I had a kid, all right, already. I was married with a kid before I said, you're a writer. And so what I would encourage you, so this is back with the startup thing. So I would ask that person, like, what do you do? What do you do when no one's watching? What do you know, are you the kind of person who's like haranguing their friends late at night, you know, at a bar saying, oh, you know, what if, you know, like Uber for vodka, you know, you're generating those, a lot of people taking notes on that one. You know, you're generating those ideas, you're starting stuff. If that's what you do, I think you're going to be good. But if that's not what you do, you need to recognize the amount of pain you're going to endure if you choose that path.
So Daniel, I've
yes. Sorry for the 30-minute answer.
No,
to
this
that
is
one,
good.
Yeah.
This is good because I actually went through probably 20 videos of you speaking.
Yeah.
This is the first time you've ever cursed.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. So we're gonna. This is the first time you saw something historic here. Awesome.
Are we videoing this?
I think so. There's
Oh,
3
okay.
cameras in front of us.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, there you go. I guess it's, you know, and also I have not even had a beer. So
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So I wanted to. So let's go to the next phase here, which is okay. I have my idea, and I've been annoying people about my idea,
Right.
and then and it's kind of oozing out of me.
Yep.
What do I need to do to sort of demonstrate the? So we, you know, again, you have this term called social proofing, like social proof.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not my term, but it's a term in the.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
Right.
But how do you demonstrate that people want your product? So do you think like so a lot of things that so there's 9 startups at the AOL Fishbowl, and I always say, hey, if you have an app, then make sure you put it onto you know, the App Store or Product Hunt. Hacker
sure.
News. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it depends on what kind of startup you have. I mean, I just think, you know, and again, this is nothing new. You already know this. I mean, I think that one of the best ideas in business that's come out, even though it's, you know, like many ideas that get popular, it ends up being overhyped. And so when people hear about something over and over and over again, they tend to roll their eyes. But I think the whole lean startup methodology is really, really powerful. I think it's the right way to go. You know, you do an early iteration of something, test it out on a small group, refine it based on that, test it out again, and I think those kinds of like small, endless iterations are really the way to go. And so I think that's it. So it's this kind of I think people are past that, but at a certain point, I remember back in the early. So this is now 20 years ago. I wrote a lot for a magazine, for Fast Company magazine, right when it came out. And there was this view of startups that was basically all about the business plan. All right, you had to have a good business plan. You had to have it mapped out. And I think there's a recognition, and even in that 20-year cycle, that you know, the business plan doesn't hold up. The business plan lasts for about 5 minutes when you deal with the ground truth of how people behave, what people like. Your users, your customers, your consumers are going to tell you a lot about what's wrong with your offering and what's not. And so, so that's what I would do.
So I want you to
Yeah.
explain that one experiment you did
Yes, sir.
at the hotel where you wanted the guests to recycle the towels.
Oh yeah, this is not my experiment. This is
That you talked about in your
yeah,
book.
of course.
So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. This is great. Okay, so this is really good.
Social,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
social
So many of you, this is a great example. The researcher here is actually a well-known guy named Robert Cialdini. How many of you have read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini? That's it? Wait, let me see the hands again. Wow. Okay, so every hand should be up. So actually, before you do anything else, write this down. Cialdini, or type it in. Cialdini.
Tweet it.
Tweet it. Cialdini. Cialdini. The book is called Influence. You should read that book. If you're a human being, you should read that book. Now, I don't care if you're a startup or not. You should read that book. You don't have to, seriously, you don't have to read any of my books. You should buy them, but you don't need to read them. So Cialdini did this great experiment, and here's what he tried to do. So he tried to, so the objective here was to get people in hotels to reuse their towels. This is, those of you who know Cialdini, who know this study. So the objective, as Brian is telling us, is to get people in hotels to reuse their towels. Why? It's good for the world, but it also saves the hotel money. So what they do is they experiment with different kinds of messaging in order to change people's behavior in that way. So they start out and they put a little, like a, I guess you call it a tent card, something like that, a tent card up in the hotel room saying something like, help save the environment. When you reuse towels, it has a positive effect on the environment, and it's a great thing to do. About 35% of people reuse their towels, which actually is not bad, but you still have 2/3 of people didn't do that. Then they try another experiment. Same hotel, tent cards go up, and this one says, help save the environment, reuse your towels. In a recent study, we discovered that 75% of our guests reuse their towels. Please reuse your towels and help save the environment. Boom, 44% of people reuse their towels. Okay, so that's a 9 percentage point increase. That's a 25% increase. That's pretty good for just tweaking the language. Then they doubled down and they put out a 10 card that said this: help save the environment. A recent study in the fall of blah, blah, blah found that 75% of guests who stayed in this room 412, reuse their towels. Please, 49% of people reuse their towels. And so this is what Cialdini calls, as Brian was saying, something called social proof. That is when and this is, I think, a really important concept in understanding your own behavior, understanding how your customers, your users are going to behave, which is that when we, human beings, when we behave, we look around for cues about how to behave, right? I mean, like a lot of behavior that if you watch people walking down the street, and no one's getting hit by a car, and people are walking on the right side of the sidewalk and not on the left side of the sidewalk unless they're tourists, no one is coordinating that. No one is setting out the rules for that. What we do is we look around for cues about how to behave, and so social proof is a very, very important driver in people's behavior.
So I want to make this very applicable to these guys because, as you guys are doing your marketing, right? Hey, I have an app. So there was one startup that I saw where it was like it was called Shelfie, and they had shown like if you take a picture of your shelf, then you'll get the audio books, like the ebooks for it, right? And so I saw this social proof on their marketing right there on their banner.
Okay.
It says,
Yep.
Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, which is a very popular VC, uses it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's a great way to.
So a testimonial is an example of that. I mean, I think another a sort of practical example of that is, let's say you're pitching to a venture capitalist, and you have you have Shelfie, and let's say Shelfie already exists, but you have something that's basically competing with Shelfie, because not only is your app going to, when you take a photograph of the shelf, it's going to give you an audio book. It's also going to give you access to the ebook and links to videos with the authors of all of those books for the exact same price. It's a better offering, all right? And so when you go to pitch, you say, we're doing this, and I want you to know this. Andreessen Horowitz just funded something similar, all right? You would think that's a negative. Well, it's actually a positive because that's proof. Oh, wait a second. Someone else did this. This means that it could be, maybe I should be doing this.
So let's continue because
Yes, sir.
there's a long lifestyle here.
Yep.
So now I've got social proof. I got my MVP, my
Yep.
prototype, whatever. Now I'm looking for advisors, right? Investors. I'm going to do this investor pitch. Now,
Okay.
okay. When I do, so let's do a cold email. Okay. So
Yep.
when I'm doing a cold email,
Yep.
typing it to Mark Andreessen,
Right.
how should this email look like, right? Should it be like short? I mean, you had talked about this in your past videos, but what should the headline look like?
Yeah.
Should it be like leaded with a question? What should
Yeah.
it look like?
Okay, so here there's actually research on this, and it's from your alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University. No applause for Carnegie Mellon.
I'll edit it in later.
What's the Carnegie Mellon mascot?
It's the tartan. It's like MIT polka dots.
The tartan or the
Tar-
tartans?
Tartans.
Tartans. Okay. So it's not okay. So
It's pretty geeky. Sorry about that.
yeah. So CMU, really, really interesting study. The methodology of it is sort of fascinating and horrifying at the same time. What they did is they had very, very in-depth way that they did this. They had their researchers stand basically behind people when people would go through their email, and people would then narrate why. Okay, I'm opening this because I'm opening that because I'm deleting that because. Okay, which sounds like that'd be really cool to do once, but imagine like that's your job, like to hear people narrate their email. So they were trying to find out what emails do people open, what emails do they ignore, et cetera, et cetera. And they found, and they did this, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And what they found are two core principles of email opening. They come down to this: utility and curiosity. Utility and curiosity. So utility is and it had to do with the subject line. Does the subject line immediately say how this is going to be useful to me? This is not like these are not shocking findings. The other one is curiosity. Is there something about the email that makes me wonder about that? And so I use this all the time. And what it shows is that under heavy loads, utility beats curiosity. Under lighter loads, curiosity will beat utility. And so if you have a busy person, it's probably best to do utility. So go for something in the subject line that says that indicates that it's going to be useful to that recipient. But if it's a cold email, my best advice is make it a warm email. Yeah. So
Get an introduction. From
yeah.
somebody.
So basically say in your subject line, Brian Park suggested that I contact you, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I got a response from the VC, and now
Woo.
they're like, okay, come to our office.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now I'm right there, right in front of the VC's office.
Yes.
Right in the door of the conference room.
Yes.
How should I pump up myself, right? Like, I mean, you had talked about this.
You're getting ready to go in there.
Yeah, you talked about this.
You're getting your game face on.
Game face on. Should I be like you talked about interrogative self-talk and this affirmative declarative, right? So I can do this. That's what I usually do. I was like, I can do this.
What do you say? Let's hear your self-talk. You're going in to pitch a big idea.
like-
What do you say to yourself?
Well, I mean, before coming here,
No,
I was
yeah,
like,
just
Daniel
no,
Pink
no.
is coming. I better put my A game, put my war
Right.
face on.
So what do you say? What do you say to yourself in your self-talk? You say,
Am I bringing home the baking tonight?
yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, so I mean, I'm curious. Like, what would people? There's actually a huge amount of research. There's a huge amount of research on self-talk. It's actually a really, really interesting area. And so, I mean, what might you say to yourself before that? We can go ask the folks out there. Just
Sure, what
shout-
would you say? What?
You got
You
this,
got it.
okay? And this is fun. That's a good one. Okay. They want. Okay, interesting. They want what I have. That's actually a really interesting one. So typically, what you hear if you do this is sort of like Jared's self-talk there. Jared, is it? Yeah, Jared's self-talk there, which is you got this. You can do this. Very positive, very affirmative. If you're male, I don't know if the women in the audience realize this, male self-talk on this regard ends up also involving a lot of killing and maiming. You got this, you're an animal, you're gonna rip it up. But leaving that aside. So positive, affirmative self-talk. Here's what the research shows. There's some really, really cool stuff on this. If you have a choice, so Brian's outside the door getting ready to go in. If Brian has a choice between that positive, affirmative self-talk and basically going in neutral, the research is very clear. Go for that positive affirmative, not even close. You're going to be better off. You're going to feel more powerful. You're going to be a little bit more pumped up. Definitely go with that. But is it the best thing that you can, thank you, Brian. Thank you. Is it the best thing that you can do? And there's some really interesting research showing that maybe it's not. Maybe there's a third alternative that most of us don't use. And it's something, as Brian just mentioned, called interrogative self-talk. Interrogative self-talk, which is going in there and saying to yourself, instead of, you can do this, you got this, asking yourself a question, saying, can you do this? And if so, how? Can you do this? And if so, how? Now, this is a little bit disturbing because it goes against all of the kind of traditional empty-headed self-help advice. You're letting doubt into the equation. This is a horrible idea. But it turns out that interrogative self-talk is often more valuable. It leads to higher performance. Why? We were talking about DJ Khaled before. This is the major key, all right? So major key here. The major key is that interrogative self-talk, by its very nature, triggers an active response, okay? If I ask a question to you, if I ask a question to myself, even if you don't respond directly, your wheels turn a little bit more than if I make a statement. So if I go into let's say I'm pitching a book. I go into a pitch meeting because it's like books are very similar to startups. It's just that, most of them fail and people don't care about them. So I go in and I've been to many pitch meetings for books and things like that. So I can go in there and say, Dan, you got this. You're awesome. You're an animal. Go get it. All right? And that's better than doing nothing. All right? I like telling myself I'm awesome. I love hearing from myself that I'm awesome. And so, but if I go in there and say, Dan, can you do this? Can you do this? What do I have? I kind of have to respond to myself, right? Can you do this? And if so, hi. So, well, yeah, I can do this. I've pitched books many times before. Yeah, I can do this. This is a really good idea. I got to make sure that I mention those 3 key points. Yeah, I can do this. Maria has always hated every idea that's ever come out that I've come up with at these meetings. I got this killer argument to really persuade Maria. Last time I was a little too hyped up. This time I got to do a better job mellowing out and listening. What am I doing there? I'm preparing. I'm rehearsing, right? And it turns out that kind of quieter muscularity is more effective than the kind of more superficially muscular, you can do it, you got this, which is better than doing nothing. And so this is the power of interrogative self-talk, asking yourself that question. What's so interesting about this, I think it's a great, great area. Let me offer 2 more tidbits, and then I'll go back. Just random tidbits about this. There's some really, so as I mentioned before, I was a linguistics major in college, and so I'm fascinated. I might be the only one on the planet, but I'm fascinated by pronouns, and yeah, all right, right. I'm glad I'm not thinking about that.
Sesame Street here,
yeah. I'm glad I didn't say that to my wife on our first date. I'm fascinated by pronouns. Anyway, but it turns out there's actually a difference in your self-talk using I and you. Self-talk is more effective when you use you. Because human beings are actually pretty good at giving other people advice. And we're pretty bad at giving ourselves advice. And so that the distancing of that second person pronoun is actually really powerful. So you should say, can I? You shouldn't say, can I do this? You should say, can you do this? Because that distance gives you some objectivity. The second thing about, wow, that went over really well. The second one is you see this. There's actually a lot of research in sports psychology about because sports is a great venue for performance because the performance is so easily measurable in most cases. Which it makes it easy to write papers on it. And so, and there's some really good research in sports showing, oversimplifying a little bit, but not too much, that really good amateurs, before a big encounter, they say, you got this, you can do this. But pros, true experts, professional athletes, let's take divers or basketball players shooting free throws, or basketball players, a better example would be basketball players throwing a pass inbound or receiving a pass from an inbound pass. LeBron doesn't do, you got this, what they do is they do interrogative self-talk. They do say, "Can you do this?" And then they answer the question. They say, "Yeah, you know what? Last time we inbounded against this team in this kind of situation, they had 3 defenders over here, so I'm going to fake in that direction and go the other way." And it turns out that there's a difference in elite athletes and amateur athletes in the form of self-talk that they use. So bottom line here is go with try out the interrogative self-talk.
Just make sure you're not talking out loud when you're doing that in
Right.
front of a VC office, right? So really quick, hashtag Startup Grind at Daniel Pink.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Keep on tweeting out because there's 3 signed books behind here. So I'm in the. Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay, I'm in the VC office right now. I want to talk about the ABCs of selling to sell as
Do you want to talk about pitching when you're in there?
We don't have time because
Okay.
we can cover. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that I want to cover.
Okay, that's
you
cool.
want to talk about
I
pitching?
mean-
We can talk about pitching. It's your
Well, I
event.
figured-
We'll talk about pitching. How about that?
Well, no, because I figure because now I'm excited because you're outside the room. I want to know what happens. You've left me in suspense. I want to know what happens when you go in.
Okay, fine. Let's talk about
So,
pitching then.
Okay.
So what
idea.
would be the
Let's
best
talk about
way
pitching.
to pitch? So I'm in front of the VCs, and then you talk about 6
I
ways
think the
of
best
pitching.
way to pitch is to interrupt kind people who've invited you to their space and suggest a different direction. That's usually my technique. No. No, so I just thought we'll be really brief because I think there's a really nice connection here, and then we'll go to the other stuff. Seriously, so because I wrote a book called To Sell Is Human. I have a whole chapter on pitching, and I really looked at pitching in a very analytic way and looked at some of the literature on pitching. And so the one thing that is really key here, one other major key, is there's some great research here. It's actually award-winning research. It's from somebody at UC Davis and somebody at Stanford. And it's really, what is the purpose of a pitch? And this has changed my behavior on pitching. What's the purpose of a pitch? And what they did here, it's a great piece of research. They looked at pitch sessions in Hollywood over several years. They had access to these pitch sessions. They went in there. They recorded these sessions, looked at the transcripts. What were the successful pitches? What were the less successful pitches? Okay, over many years, like really detailed things here. And they found out what was a characteristic of, see if you can guess, what was a characteristic of the most successful pitches? They had one characteristic in common. Here's what it is. The pitches invited the other side in to participate. All right? And this changed my view of pitching, even the way I pitch books, is that my view of pitching was this. You come up with this awesome pitch. It's almost like a vaudeville act. Ba-da-da-da-da-da, 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 boom! You know, and they, oh, that's brilliant! And they get out the checkbook. That's not what pitching is. Pitching is, you know it's a good pitch, according to this research, when you say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and they say, that's really interesting. What if you added Q to that? And then you say, oh, that's interesting, Q, you know. And so what you want to do, a pitch is an invitation to collaborate. That's what the most successful pitches are. And this really changed my view of I mean, truly, when I go and pitch stuff now, I think about it that way. So we can move on to the other stuff, but this is really, you know, just some great research out there on pitching that changed my view of it. Don't think of it as like a little performance to get applause. Think of it as an invitation that intrigues and brings collaboration. Those are the pitches that work.
Is that so? You had 6 new ways of pitches here in your book. Is that the Pixar pitch you're talking about?
No, that's sort of the meta, the version of the pitch.
Okay.
And so in the book I talk about
the one-word pitch.
six different kinds of pitches based on some research there. So you know, different kinds of things like pitching with a question is often very effective for the same reasons that interrogative self-talk is. There's a guy, Maurice Sachi, big ad man in the UK, who has I think a really brilliant idea. I think is really important for startups as well, of this idea that he calls one-word equity. One-word equity. And this one-word equity means that there's such a ferocious demands on people's attention today that if you have an offering, you want to own a word, a single word, so that when people think of that word, they think of you. When people think of you, they think of that word. And so you see this in something like, you know, when
Uber.
Huh?
Uber is a good
Right.
example.
Right. So it's sort of like, well, they have, yeah. So Uber, I guess their one word would be sort of like pickup or something like that. You know, it's like, But a good example would be, let's do it the other direction. That's a good example. The other direction would be something like search. Right. They own that. They own that. They own that word. And so, but what this does in your pitching is it really forces you to edit things down, edit things down, edit things down, edit things down. What's your one-word equity? And I think I think it's a really powerful exercise for startups to go through. Is saying, okay, what's our word? When someone says that word, we want them to think of us. When they think of us, we want them to think of that word.
Cool. Hashtag Sauerkraut at Daniel Pink. Let's get straight into the ABCs
Yeah, sure.
of selling. Right, you're in front of the VCs.
Yes.
And so let's talk about the ABCs,
Yeah.
right? Attunement, buoyancy,
Yeah.
and clarity. So how do we make ourselves attune in this meeting to the VC? So first talk about what the ABCs are, and then let's talk about
Sure.
attunement.
Okay. So basically, the premise of this of this latest book that Brian is mentioning is essentially this: that people are selling all the time, but we're doing it on a read-made landscape. Most of what we know about sales of anything, of ideas, of ourselves, of products and services, has come from a world of information asymmetry, where the seller always knew more than the buyer. That world has disappeared. We're in a world of information parity. So what I looked at is, how do you persuade, sell ethically and effectively in a world of information parity, when the truth is the vast majority of sales literature was from a world where sellers had an information advantage. So looking at the research, there's a wide array of research across different behavioral sciences, from cognitive science back to linguistics to social psychology, behavioral economics. You can piece together these three core qualities that are necessary to be effective. And one of them, and it's basically through luck, they all start with ABC. So attunement. Attunement is perspective taking. Can you get out of your own head, see things from someone else's point of view? Really important. Buoyancy. I got this from a guy who sold brushes door to door in San Francisco, who said that the hard part about selling is that every day you face an ocean of rejection. An ocean of rejection. Buoyancy is, how do you stay afloat in that ocean of rejection? Clarity has two dimensions. We live in a world awash in information, so having access to information doesn't give you any edge, because everybody has information. What you have to be able to do is curate, overused word I know, curate information, make sense of information, separate out the signal from the noise in information. And then another aspect of clarity is, a lot of people in sales say, I'm not in sales, I'm a problem solver. And God bless you for being a problem solver. The truth is that if your customer or client prospect knows exactly what their problem is, they don't need you very much. They don't need you very much. They might need you to be one of 2 or 3 bidders to drive down the price. Where they really need you is when they're wrong about their problem, or they have a problem they don't know that they have. So it's not like, let's take Uber as the example that Brian just mentioned. I don't want to celebrate Uber. I have nothing against Lyft, whatever. I'm completely agnostic about that. I have no commercial connection to any of these places. But I ended up taking, I did take UberX down here. And so, but it wasn't like, and I use Uber sometimes, but it wasn't as if I had a problem, right? It wasn't as if I said to my wife, gee, Jessica, for the life of me, I cannot find a complete stranger to drive to our house and pick me up and take me somewhere, right? It wasn't problem solving, it was problem finding. So those are the ABCs: attunement, buoyancy, and clarity.
So back to
Yes.
attunement.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the techniques, with the VCs?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
Attunement.
okay.
There we
I
go.
see.
So I'm doing it right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what sort of techniques that we could do, like mimic the mimicry,
Yep.
mimic the body gestures, repeat what they had said. I mean, let's talk about that. Like, what would be the most effective way?
So the most there are many things that you can do. There are many things that you can do, and again, you have to understand what you're trying to do, which is sort of see things from someone else's point of view. Let me give there's a lot of research on this. I'll give you two quick tidbits here. So one of them is, think about the difference. There's a lot of research on negotiation, where they put people into, there's a common fact pattern used in a lot of negotiation research that has to do with the sale of a gasoline station. So they give people the facts, and they say, go in and get a good deal. And it's the facts are written in a way that you can make a deal, but it's challenging, okay? And so imagine this experiment here. See if you can guess it. So you got three groups of participants. One group, you give them the facts, they say, go in and get a good deal. Second group, they say, go in, here are the facts, go in and get a good deal, but you second group, I want you to focus on the other side's emotions. Focus on their emotions, focus on their feelings. Third group, they say, here are the facts, go in and get a good deal. You third group, I want you to focus on their thoughts and their interests. Okay, so I'll give you a hint. The thoughts and interest group and the feeling group did better than the control group. Who did better between the thoughts, the thinkers and the feelers? How many people think thinkers? How many people think feelers? Right, that's what we want the answer to be, but it's the thinkers. All right, and this is really important in understanding attunement. I want to make that distinction here, so it's not get seduced into thinking that it's only emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is extraordinarily important on a whole range of things. But when it comes to actual transactions, what the research shows, here's the thing. You want to get both channels. You're going to do better if you have the emotional channel and the thoughts and interest channel. No question about that. You want to have both channels. But there are limits to how much cognitive load we can take at any given moment, right? You go in, you're thinking about a million things, and so we tend to be overconfident about how much cognitive load that we can bear. We can't bear all that much. So inevitably, you have to jettison some things. And what the research shows pretty clearly, we might not like it, is that in commercial transactions, not with people you love, not with people you care about deeply in some other way, but in these kinds of transactional things, if you have to jettison something, jettison the thoughts and the feelings. Focus on the other side's interests. What's in it for them? What's in it for them? What's in it for them? Now, another thing that Brian mentioned also, which is really, really powerful, is that there's all these tales about. Anybody been through sales training? Some of you, a lot of you have. Okay, did they ever talk about mimicry? Oh, you should. Okay, so it sounds like BS, right? It's not. It's amazing. I mean, I spent like an entire month looking at the research trying to disprove it because I found it a little bit icky. And it's not even a close call. What the research shows is that human beings are natural mimickers. That we, you look at people who like each other, who are getting along, who are, connecting in some fashion, and they end up kind of mimicking each other in their gestures, in their posture, in the way that they stand, even in their word use. And there's some really, really great research, again, from the world of negotiation, showing that when you train negotiators to mimic the gestures and whatnot of the other side, you end up with a better deal for both sides. And one of the important things here for those of you who are doing very technical things, and again, trying to give like very, very specific tactical advice, one of the reasons that technical people go awry is in this area of mimicry. Not in sort of the gestures and the stances and whatnot, but in the word use. Because people who are technically sophisticated love their specialized jargon. They love it to death. And you know what? When they talk to civilians who don't know that specialized jargon, right? Don't do that. There's a lot of good research showing that using the language of the other person is a way. It's not duplicity at all. This mimicry research doesn't show duplicity. It shows it's a natural part of who human beings are. That when you stand the way someone else is standing, use their gestures, you actually understand their point of view a little bit better. And the same thing is true with language, particularly those of you who are in technical fields. Don't diss the other side, the customers or prospects for using civilian language rather than your more accurate specialized jargon. In fact, use their language or use their language as a jumping off point to teach them the more specialized jargon. One quick piece of research here. Waiters and waitresses. A lot of research on waiters and waitresses because you can use tips as a dependent variable, something you can count. Variations of this experiment, two groups of waiters and waitresses. One group, they say, take the order as usual. Second group, they say, repeat the customer's order back word for word. No matter what they say, repeat the order back word for word. You look at the accuracy of orders, they're about the same. You look at the level of tips, monumentally higher in this group of waiters and waitresses who repeated the customer's order back to them word for word. So this idea that Brian's talking about mimicry is, it sounds, I didn't like it at first, but I understand it better now, and it's very effective. The other thing interesting about it is that they do these kind of confirmation checks in a lot of these studies. So they say to the people who are being mimicked, more subtly than this, but did you feel like you were being mimicked? And almost nobody ever says no because it's such a, if you're worried about going too far, you won't. Period. That's it. It's the people who don't say, oh, I wonder if I'm going too far. It's people who never think that who end up going too far. But if you just wonder whether you're going too far, you're not.
Hashtag Startup Grind. That's Daniel Pink. I know. I'm just trying to. There's 3 books behind.
No,
me,
you know what? So but it's a great technique because. No, I mean it.
Okay.
There is. So
backing me up.
So we can talk about processing fluency.
Okay.
All right. So what you want to? Okay. So can I?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's your show, man. You can.
No, it's your
I don't have to
show.
say
I'm
anything.
just the guest who will never be invited back. No. So, but this is what Brian is doing is actually really, really, really smart on this repeating thing. Here's the point. So there's this notion in. This is like the most I've talked about linguistics in like years, but it's awesome. So there's a notion in linguistics called processing fluency. All right, we're going to come to that in a second. Let me go to the key. Let me give you the quick study here. So here's a study from Lafayette College. Here's what they did. They gave people proverbs, divided the participants into 2 groups, gave them all proverbs. Half the group, like this side, we gave you proverbs that rhymed. Half the group, we gave them proverbs that didn't rhyme. But they're almost identical. So this group gets the rhyming proverbs. Woes unite foes. This one gets something like woes unite enemies. This one gets caution and measure will win you treasure. This one gets caution and measure will win you riches. Okay? Basically the same idea. One set of proverbs rhymes, one does not. These people don't know what group they're in. They don't even know that it's obviously that it's an experiment about rhyming. Their job is to say, which of these proverbs rate these, we gave them 30 proverbs, 40 proverbs. Which of these proverbs accurately describe the human condition? The group where the proverbs rhymed rated them higher than the group where they didn't rhyme. That is, they thought they were more accurate, more insightful. What's going on here is this concept of processing fluency. When your message goes down easier, not only it's absorbed, but it's also believed. That is, it's believed because it's absorbed. And so rhyming is something that really increases processing fluency. And it's interesting when you look at, say, how little kids learn how to read or how little kids learn language. Nursery rhymes, Dr. Seuss, right? Rhymes increase processing fluency. And so that's why one of the pitches that I have here is a rhyming pitch. And so even though it sounds cheesy, it actually can be somewhat effective. Now, back to Brian here for a second. So there are things that we know in the world of social science that increase processing fluency. Rhyming is one of them. But one of the most effective and least used is repetition. Repetition. Let me say that again. Repetition. All right? And repetition is one of the things that increases processing fluency. And so the idea, it's preposterous in a way, in a world where people's attention is splintered all over the place, that you can say something once and stand a reasonable chance of being heard and remembered. I mean, that's a preposterous idea. There's something to be said for repetition. And so repeating things and repeating things and repeating things is a very, very, very effective technique.
Hashtag Startup Grind.
There you go.
So
that was like an alley-oop.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, but I
geez.
want to fast forward here. Got the funding. I wanted to talk about retaining retaining talent using autonomy, but I actually want to fast forward to, let's just go building a sales team.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And so, I talked about like extroverts and introverts, and so a lot of people think that we should hire a lot of extroverts for our sales team.
Sure, a lot of people do hire extroverts.
What is your opinion? Like, how should we build our sales team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at the early stages, I think what you have to recognize in a startup is that everybody's a sales team. Every single person is a sales team. And there's some interesting examples of startups that have gone for a certain amount of time without a sales team because they think of everybody as a sales team. Palantir, a big company, has an office here in D.C. It doesn't have a sales force. It looks at its certain engineers sort of have that function because they're closer to the customer. But if you're going to have a sales force, I think having a sales force is a good idea. As Brian is saying, the instinct is to go for extroverts. So what the research shows is this: extroverts more likely to go into sales, more likely to get hired in sales jobs, more likely to get promoted in sales jobs. But when you look at the link between the correlation between extroversion and sales performance, who sells stuff, the correlation is 0. Well, close to 0. It's not quite 0. So, but here's the this will be my last major key. This is a major key right here. It doesn't mean that strong introverts are better. The real advantage, some great research from a guy named Adam Grant, just brilliant piece of research. Here's what it shows. The best salespeople are not strong extroverts, but they're not strong introverts either. There's almost like imagine here, we'll draw a chart in the air here, because this is always, you guys can handle this. Here's a chart, all right? So this is sort of, the vertical axis is kind of sales effectiveness. Higher is better than lower, make sense? And imagine this as a scale, horizontal axis, a scale of extroversion, where down here, it's extremely introverted, and over here is extremely extroverted. You with me? Here's what it looks like. It's a bell curve. It's a bell curve. Strong introverts stink at sales. They're horrible. Strong extroverts, they're almost as bad. Strong extroverts are terrible salespeople. They're awful. They talk too much, they're pushy, they don't listen, they give sales a bad name. And the scary part is that strong extroverts are who get hired. Even though, if you look at the literature, there is the idea of that strong extroverts make better salespeople is an absolute myth. There is no evidence of that. There is evidence to the contrary. There's evidence to the contrary of that. You look at something like gregariousness. Gregariousness is inversely correlated with sales success. Whoa. But here's the key. You don't go with the strong introverts. The people who do the best are the people in the middle. People who are known in the literature, this is a term that's been in the literature since the 1920s, but no one ever uses it, ambiverts. Ambiverts. The people who do the best at sales are ambiverts. What is that? What does it mean to be an ambivert? Think about what's another word where we use ambi as a prefix? Ambidextrous. They're ambidextrous. They can go left, they can go right. Of course, I just did it the reverse way, but they can go left, they can go right. They know when to speak up, but they also know when to shut up. They know when to push, but they also know when to hold back. And so the research shows that the best people in sales are these ambiverts, the people in the middle. The best news of all for those of you who might have great ideas, good leaders, good product people, but resist this idea of selling because it's not who you are, is this. Is that if you look at the distribution of introversion and extroversion in the population, it also looks like this. Relatively few of us are super strong introverts. Relatively few of us are super strong extroverts. Most of us are ambiverts. And so chances are that most people have the native capacity to be effective in sales. So what you want to look for is like sort of eliminate the edges. If someone's a strong extrovert, send them packing. You know, if someone's a strong introvert, chances are they're not even coming for a sales job, but you know, if they are, quietly dismiss them. So once you have the ambiverts, though, what you're looking for are other kinds of traits. You're looking for things like conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, the trait of conscientiousness, which is one of the things in psychology called the big five, one of the big personality attributes. Conscientiousness is one of the best predictors of performance that there is, including in sales. So you want to look for conscientiousness. You want to look for grit. And you want to look for, I think especially now in sales, you want to look for instances in the past where they have developed expertise. Because I think more and more sales is about developing real expertise. So if they're ambiverted, which they probably are, conscientious, gritty, and are willing to develop expertise, they're probably quite good.
So, I mean, that's most of the people in this room, right?
I don't think they'd be here. I mean, I think those are traits also of founders as well.
Right.
I don't think that a super introverted founder is really, really hard to imagine. A super extroverted founder is kind of hard to imagine. My guess, I don't know this, I don't know if this has ever been studied, but most founders are a little bit, they're a little bit crazy and a lot of bit ambiverted.
Got it. So we actually run out of time here, but we have 2 last questions. So what's the future of Daniel Pink? I mean, are you working on a new book? Talk a little bit about that.
I
maybe?
am.
Okay. What's the concept?
I am studying timing, how to have better timing. We like to think that timing is an art. I actually think it's more of a science. There's some really, really good research on this on When should you have your first cup of coffee in the morning? When should you quit a job? When should you get married? When should you fire somebody? When should you change careers? When should you start a diet? All kinds of really interesting stuff on timing, and and there's some things, and there's some startup things that are really germane. For instance, Bill Gross, who from you guys know, so the Idea Lab guy, he did interesting study of his portfolio companies, trying to predict which startup in his portfolio, because he has an incubator, sort of incubator slash VC. I'm not sure exactly what the model is, but he has a lot of portfolio, more than 100 portfolio companies over the last 25 years. Some big successes, some big bombs, and he looked at them and said, okay, I'm trying to crack the code here. What really determines whether a startup makes it and whether it doesn't? And so he looked at team, and he looked at financing, and he looked at the market, and he found the single best predictor was timing. Single best predictor was timing. And there's some really good other research there on, you talk about, I want to have a first mover advantage. A lot of times, a first mover advantage doesn't help you all that much. You want to be, I like to call it, you want to be the second mouse, right? The early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese, right? Because the first, you got it. And so timing in startups is really important. Brian and I were talking earlier about this question of, and I don't have an answer to this, I'm trying to puzzle it out now, is like, when do you fire somebody who isn't, you have a new hire, you have a small team. When do you actually fire somebody? And there's a split in the world of kind of Silicon Valley style management about that. You have a view of the I'm spacing on his name. Who's the CEO? Not Reid Hoffman, the other guy, Jeff
Weiner.
Jeff Weiner has this idea that he says the biggest mistake I've made in business is that, he uses a sports analogy, baseball analogy. I left the pitcher in too long. That's the mistake that I made. I left the pitcher in too long. Meanwhile, you have a guy like Ed Catmull, the Pixar guy, who says, the biggest mistake I've made in my career has been getting rid of people too early. And his view is, you keep the pitcher in until the teammates start complaining. So your shortstop calls a timeout and comes to the dugout and says, pull this guy. And so there's some interesting questions of timing in when do you fire somebody? There's some interesting questions in timing about when do you go to VCs, and then maybe ultimately when do you go to public markets if you're very successful. Some really, really great issues of timing in the world of startups.
So one last question.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I have two.
Okay.
So one last question before my short second one. If you could go back 20 years ago, what would be the single most important advice you would have given yourself?
Can I go back a little further?
Okay, 30 years.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I'm one of the older people here, I think. So because 20 years ago I was less messed up. Okay, 30.
You weren't a lawyer then.
30 years ago. I'll think of three things, but I'll be brief. Okay. One. No, I'll do that in last. Okay. First of all, I would say the advice I would give my younger self. So I'm 51, so that'd be 21. Okay. And I was a freaking idiot then. All right. So you'll see why. Number one. Watch the overconfidence. Watch the overconfidence. You have demonstrated at age 21 no reason to be confident, let alone overconfident. All right? And particularly in understanding how certain kinds of settings work. So, and this goes to the law school thing. Like, I basically decided to go to law school because I was a middle-class kid from Ohio, and I wanted something to quote-unquote fall back on. But I truly had no idea what law school was and no idea what lawyers did. But, I know what law school is. Yeah, I know what lawyers do. Yeah. And I was absolutely clueless from my overconfidence. So that's one thing. The second thing is that is I would tell my younger self, sort of from my vantage point, and I've told this to my kids, there has never been an instance in my life on any project that I've done, and I see my work life as a series of projects, whether it's a television show or a book or whatever, there has never been an instance where I felt like I worked too hard. There's always more to do. There's a lot of work to do out there. And, again, I hate to use a kind of this cliche sports analogy here, but, like, don't leave anything in the dugout. I mean, I really mean that. Like, if you're gonna do it, do it. And I actually sort of changed my view there. There's a guy, Derek Sievers, who has this idea, like I have this sort of rule of thumb where I say, if for new projects for me, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And so commit your, like, full committal. And then the third one would be, which might be the most important, is just sort of navigating life, is, you know what? Do not care so much, if at all, only modestly, do not care so much about what other people think. Just don't care about it. Because the dirty little secret is that most of them are not thinking about you. Second, the small minority who are, who cares? You care about the opinion of someone you don't even respect? I mean, so just get that out of your head. And I find that it might be an act of maturity, but there was a certain moment or set of moments in my life when I basically stopped caring. Not in a pathological way, but I stopped caring about what other people thought. I was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do what I feel like doing. And you know what? If someone thinks I'm an idiot, if someone thinks I'm a loser, if someone thinks I'm dumb, if someone thinks I'm foolish, I don't care. I mean, if someone I love thinks that, if my wife thinks that, I take it very seriously. If my kids think, well, my kids do think that. But, it's somebody who I care about, someone I work with, someone I respect, someone in that very close inner circle. Obviously, I care deeply about that. But beyond that core group of people, because most of us have maybe 20 people in our lives who to go sort of, I'll write the scales here by swearing early. I mean, who we love in some way. Not only like we love our siblings and we love our parents and we love our spouses and we love our partners and we love our children, but there are other people in our lives who we work with closely enough, who've become our friends over years, who we really do love in a way. And those are the people you want to care about, okay? I have a group of friends who I met my freshman year of college. We happened to live in the same hallway in my freshman year of college, which was in the early Reagan administration. And we have remained friends to this day. I probably have emails or texts from one of them. I met these fellows, they're all men, 3 decades ago, okay? Those are like, I love those people. Or I don't love them the way I love my wife or my kids, but I love them. There are certain people who I've worked with for so long who I love them in a way, okay? Those people, yeah, you care about what they think, because those people tend to love you back, and they care about you. But you know what? Beyond that circle, I'll end on this. Can I end on a swear word?
Well, yeah, you can.
Beyond that inner circle of people who you love, who gives a shit?
What? That was an awesome answer, by the way. One last question. This is probably the most important question.
Yes, sir.
I ask all my speakers.
Okay. Yeah.
You ready for it? So, who is your favorite superhero / historic figure, and why?
/ historic figure or historic figure? Okay, yeah. Because my favorite superhero / historic figure, of course, is Super Ben Franklin. My favorite historic figure is, I would have to say, Charles Darwin. Because Charles Darwin was somebody who was driven by his ideas, who worked very slowly, and basically said to the world, hey, I think we're getting this a little bit wrong. I think there's another way to think about it. Here's my evidence. And he did, he really did, changed science. He changed our notions of who we are in a really powerful way. And he was a dude who, obviously not like me, but he was a dude like me in the sense that he loved his wife and he worked out of a garage.
So you already told me this answer.
I actually have a Charles Darwin doll on my desk.
Oh, you do?
For like inspiration, yeah.
Well, now you're going to have to put this one on your
Okay.
desk. This was a poster we created. It's Charles Darwin. You can pick it up. Charles Darwin. And it says it is
Oh
not
my God.
It's not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those
I
who
love
can
it.
be who can best manage change. And he says Daniel Pink is the man.
Yeah.
Right there.
And that's
So-
actually, yeah, I love it.
There we go. So,
Awesome. Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you for coming out, Daniel.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. That was fun.
So here we go. You can